Thank you guys for joining today's Twitter Spaces event. My name is Adam Wozni. I head up community at Overclock Labs. Today I'm joined by two very special guests. First up, it's David Shea. I want to make sure I'm saying your last name. Is that correct, David? David Shea?
Perfect.
Perfect. Excellent. And David is the co-founder and CEO of Babylon Chain. And then we have a very familiar guest, Greg Osuri, the co-founder of Akash Network and CEO Overclock Labs. How are you doing today, Greg? You nervous about the announcement?
I'm not nervous at this point. Yeah, I already priced in everything that could happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the
On the
same.
bright side, Cosmos is so underexposed to a lot of these ecosystems that we shouldn't be affected in any major way. And so, it's just popcorn time for me.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I'm like, let's see what these guys have to say. They're just, you know, scratching for something to do. I feel like so. We'll see what this in quotes cryptocurrency enforcement thing is they're going to talk about. So I've got the live stream going. I'll keep an eye on that. But we're here to talk about Babylon Chain and Akash. So I wanted to just quick kick it off to maybe have you guys quickly introduce yourselves and talk briefly about your project. So maybe David, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about Babylon Chain and maybe introduce yourself to some of the guests on the line here.
Yeah, so great. Hey, thanks for having me here. It's great to be able to have this conversation with Greg. Yeah, so a little bit introduction to myself. I'm a professor at Stanford, and I lead a research group at Stanford doing research on blockchain consensus protocols. So we've been working on this for 3 or 4 years, and during this process, we have a lot of we do a lot of basic research as well as collaboration with industry. For example, we collaborate with Ethereum Foundation on the ETH 2.0, the POS Ethereum protocol. So we have some contributions there before the merge and ongoing actually. So through this process, we learn a lot about proof of stake protocol and the potential advantages and potential security limitations. We've also done a lot of work on proof of work protocol. And then we came up with this idea that, hey, maybe combining proof of work and proof of stake, you can get kind of the best of both worlds. And what is better for a proof of stake chain than Bitcoin? And so that was the idea that we came up with during research. And we founded this project, Babylon Chain, to put this idea into practice. And we started working on this in the beginning of this year, raised some seed fund, and me and my co-founder, Fisher, so we recruited a bunch of, I think, very excellent engineers to build this Babylon chain. And the goal is to bring Bitcoin security and into the proof of stake world. In particular, we are very much focused on the Cosmos ecosystem because of reasons I will elaborate more later on.
Thank you, David. I'm super excited for Babylon in general because, well, obviously, like David said, it's Bitcoin security. Bitcoin, we all know, is the most secure chain, right? And all of us, I think, in Cosmos, I'm going to say this, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble, are secretly Bitcoin maximalists. Uh, but in all seriousness, I think Bitcoin has an incredible amount of security. And if we can borrow some of the security into a proof of stake chain, I think it makes the ecosystem a lot more stronger. And another unique part of Babylon chain is it's security as a service if you actually unravel what's really happening. And you don't find this sort of offering in many other ecosystems other than Cosmos that tells you the composability that you get with this hyper modularization, where you can, choose, what part of what component of your chain can come from where, right? And you as in the community can choose, and that makes it extremely powerful. The fact that projects don't have to subscribe to a single ideology, but rather have a diverse set of ideologies and diverse set of properties that could be shared with a shared code base. So that's a very
Yeah,
powerful
I cannot
concept.
agree with that more. So I have to jump in. I have to jump in,
Sure.
Greg, because I can't agree with that more because this is really a very good example of a concept called, I think, emerging concept, composable security. Composable security, where you can compose different chains together to form different level of security, different source of security, and so forth.
And also have individual security for different assets you're securing, right? Like, say you're securing, I don't know, $1 billion, you probably want much higher security versus securing XQL NFT, right? Like, so I think that we're going to see that sort of composability happen, and you pay higher price for securing higher valuable items, just like in the real world. I think that's going to come to Cosmos as well. So I'm super excited for composable security.
Yep.
Yeah, I was able to check out this morning. I went on the Babylon website and watched that explainer video you had, David. Really cool project. Kind of jumping into some of the questions, and I want to make note for everyone listening in. If you do have questions at any point throughout today's conversation with David and Greg, just make a speaker request, and I'll get you in on the conversation here. So for David, I kind of wanted to see, what opportunities do you see for Babylon to kind of help secure the Cosmos IBC network?
Yeah, so one of the use case that we are working on is reducing the unbonding time. So that's a very concrete use case. Maybe I should take one step back and say the following. As Greg said, Bitcoin security, or in general composable security, allows you to give different level of security to different assets or different transactions, even at whatever granularity you want. But there's price to pay for security. And in the case of Bitcoin security, the main price to pay is actually not necessarily dollar sign, but really in terms of latency. So if you want to get confirmation on something very important, then maybe it's okay waiting a little bit longer. And one such particular transaction that we are particularly interested in is the unbonding request. So in any proof of stake network, people wants to leave, people wants to join, and when they leave, they would issue an unbonding request. Now, what we are doing with Babylon is that we're saying, hey, this unbonding request is so important that we should give it Bitcoin security. And so number one is now being able to leave the network, you have to be very sure that nothing weird is going on, and Bitcoin is providing that support. Number two is that although Bitcoin is in general slow, in reputation slow, but in this particular case, it will take 1 day or half a day to get a very, very solid confirmation of Bitcoin, but that's still much faster than the 21 day of unbonding, which is the typical day in the Cosmos chain. In fact, in many proof of stake chain, the unbonding time is typically of the order of weeks. So this is an example of a use case where Bitcoin security is used in such a way that although it's slow compared to like a few seconds, it's still much faster than the 21 day. And so that was one good use case that we start off the project with.
Yeah, Greg, I wanted to see if you could maybe chime in too and kind of get your thoughts on, securing the Cosmos with Babylon. What are some things you're thinking about over on the Overclock Lab side for kind of helping with security on Cosmos?
Like, before we jump in, I think we clear the air. The announcement action that came was Bitzalo. I have never heard of this. It's a Russian, apparently it's a Russian crypto exchange that I'd never heard of. Can we sue DOJ for wasting 20 minutes of my life?
I have the live stream going right now, and I was just kind of watching it, just reading the captions, waiting for the announcement, and that's what it is. Bitzalo is
the
being
major international enforcement action
put on.
that they announced.
But I
Wow.
I can see already a sudden increase in our number of listeners here in this Twitter space after the announcement is made.
Yeah, I'm glad, because people were like, "Holy shit, he's hit my Tether,
Okay,
he's hit my Binance. I'll go home today." Can't really tell.
All right.
Yeah.
Now we can focus on Bitcoin
thank God.
Bitcoin security.
Right.
So what are we doing at what Overclock Labs to ensure that? So what's this? I'm sorry, I totally got distracted with this whole thing. What was the question again?
No, you're fine.
So question is,
So yeah, I
yeah.
was kind of the question around securing the Cosmos. What are some things we're thinking about over at Overclock to kind of help secure Cosmos and IBC
I mean,
transactions?
like, as Overclock Labs is the company that initially created Akash network, and obviously we were the first IBC chain, right? After the hub, first IBC transaction ever recorded in history was done between Akash and Cosmos Hub. So we were, sort of like, no, we weren't the first chain to to launch on Tendermint, but we were certainly the first, second chain to launch IBC. That gives that opens up opportunity to further take our proof of stake, delegate a proof of stake consensus model to something like a mesh model or interchain security model, right? So a mesh security is a new sort of like paradigm that's sort of getting popularity in the Cosmos ecosystem, where if you have a shared set of validators between chains, that shared set of validators can validate these chains at a lower cost, right? And lower cost also better security. So not all chains have same levels of security. So, but if you can somehow borrow security from each other, that'll be that'll be greatly beneficial to the ecosystem. As what we're doing, at the company and at the protocol level is to make that sort of like provisioning of security much simple, right, in terms of user experience, because providing security means actually launching the chain and ensuring the updates are proper, ensuring the data is synced in real time and whatnot. It's a complicated, non-trivial project, right? So we're building tools that allow this to happen in a frictionless manner at a price point that's amenable, that's great for everybody, right? So that's our mission to make Web3 infrastructure simple to use and cheaper to use.
Great. And passing it back over to David, kind of sticking with the security kind of conversation here is, I had a question on checkpointing. First off, what is checkpointing, and what is how does checkpointing help Babylon secure the Cosmos zones?
Yeah, okay. So um, a lot of the attacks that happens on chains, potential attacks, is the following: is that you have a chain that is going on, and someone decides to double spend on that chain, which means they want to revert some of the history of the transactions. To do that, they create a fork on the chain. So basically, the idea of checkpointing, or the idea of timestamping, the terms are used interchangeably, is to basically say that actually, you know what, the current chain that is ongoing is actually the more existing chain, and that is recorded by sending a transaction to Bitcoin, a hash of the block, of the POS block, and put it on Bitcoin to record the time at which that block was created. So by doing that, no one can attack the chain anymore, because that block is proved to be earlier from Bitcoin. So that's why checkpointing or timestamping on, say, a secure chain like Bitcoin is very useful in terms of providing security to another chain. So that's the basic technology that Babylon uses.
Got it. So checkpointing is just kind of another term for timestamping.
Yes, yes, exactly. The time. So if you think about it, the Nakamoto's white paper, the 9-page white paper that started the project, he said the following. He said, what we need as a decentralized system is to have a decentralized time stamping server. And what he said is that that's what I'm creating. Bitcoin is a decentralized time stamping server. But the time stamping server is used for a particular application, which is to timestamp Bitcoin transactions, to timestamp when Alice pays Bob 1 Bitcoin. Now, what we're saying is that now that you've created such a secure timestamping server, you can actually use that to timestamp not only Bitcoin transactions, but also events that are happening on other chains. And so that's what we are basically doing.
Very cool and very needed, it sounds like. I want to toss it over to Greg here and talk a little bit about kind of our recent announcement about Akash. So last week, we announced that the entire contribution process for building on Akash is now fully open source. So mad snaps to that whole project. Um, could you maybe just give us a bit of an overview of this new model and what it means for Akash kind of going forward?
Absolutely. So the recent announcement Adam is talking about is, we proposed a framework to, to open source a process along with code. So for context, from Akash Network, we started building Akash 7 years ago, and we open source about 5 years ago. The entire source code and all the relevant technologies that essentially touch any user is open source. Overclock being the company that created Akash Network in the first version of it, and Overclock Labs hosting the code base, right? But the process to create the code was not very open, not very transparent. In the sense, it was traditional software development process where a company gathers requirements and creates a spec and develops it internally and open sources once the tech is complete. Um, the While we can make quite a lot of progress, and we've done enough, quite a lot, right, since launching the blockchain, the first version, the platform itself. We added incredible features like storage and IP discovery, and now we're speeding through GPUs. You can move really fast as a company that is not engaged or like involved in an open setting to build the source code. Uh, but what we notice is not for what we notice. It's obvious that Akash's mission is so large that we cannot operate in a closed open setting. The only way to really scale and take Akash to the next level is to engage and involve our incredible developer community. So that's why we decided to, you know, open the process itself. Right now, how does that look like? So what it really comes down to is, how do we create self-organizing groups that are accountable uh, to each other, and its members are accountable and actually delivering work. So we proposed a framework that we were able to build off previous learnings from successful projects like Kubernetes and a whole lot of other the cloud native foundation ecosystems, and model a framework we think is has worked before, and I think will work even better when you have actual incentives the crypto land gives us, and do it much better than most of them, right? So that's the announcement we made. We're super excited about it, and we already started seeing, I think, like 9 new contributors from outside the company. There are more number of contributors to Akash source code that don't work at Overclock's labs now than before. So that's just a remarkable testament, saying that, just to showcase that, within 1 week itself we got incredible amount of contributors. Yeah, you can only imagine what that'll look like a month from now, or 3 months from now, 4 months from now, right? And the beauty now is, any member of Akash ecosystem, if they want to propose a feature, they want to propose an idea, can attend, these meetings that are completely conducted in the open. The minutes and the transcripts, as long and even the videos, are actually posted on the Akash Network website, so it's easy to find and easily comment. So the goal is, every time you see a feature, you want to be able to trace back its origins all the way to the special interest group meeting they had, or the working group they're part of, or a user group they were part of, all the way trace it back, and understand the context of it. This also gives an incredible wealth of content and knowledge on how to even build chains, right? So with this approach, we hope that we can export this mechanism to the rest of the Cosmos ecosystem and beyond. And of course, it's not going to come without its shortfallings. And we'll only know, we've done good job in covering for those shortfalls, and we'll only know the shortcomings as we go about implementing this model. I'm super excited about it. We have a kickoff meeting on the 23rd, I believe, the steering committee kickoff meeting, and some of the groups are already sort of in motion. The most active groups are SIG clients, which is which is responsible for developing the client ecosystem for Akash network, like CloudMoss or Fleek, and some of these UIs that are being built on top of Akash. I think that's happening today, if I'm not wrong. But so some of the groups are already in active stages, and but the steering committee will have an official opening on 23rd. So it's super exciting. I mean, it's never been done before. I think we have. One thing I pride myself of being in Cosmos ecosystem is how decentralized the process is. Right, Cosmos is incredible. One of the most incredible parts is that the founders of Cosmos ecosystem or Cosmos, technology in general, are not as active as you would normally see in other chains like Solana or Ethereum, right? Like Ethan Buckman and Jay Kwan, the founders are mostly contributors now more than the dictatorial the mechanism that we see with other chains. That also means the development of Cosmos ecosystem is a lot more decentralized now, right? One could make an argument that if the development, which is an attack vector, right? If you look at decentralization like an onion, on the surface being the consensus mechanism, and then the governance mechanism, and then the development mechanism. If you start peeling enough layers, you'll start noticing the cracks in the system. So ultimately, it comes down to who's actually writing the code, who's actually controlling the website, who's actually controlling the communications. Those become the attack vectors. So if you can sufficiently decentralize these layers, you will be able to create a much better system when it comes to resiliency, when it comes to withstanding these attack vectors. And in that sort of vein, we created this framework to 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 sort of like solve for some of the shortcomings of the Cosmos ecosystem, which happens to be organization, right? Cosmos being so diverse and so decentralized, the price we pay is the coordination cost, or the organization, right? So we're not very as organized as Ethereum or Solana is. So with these special interest groups and user groups, we hope to solve the organization problems while keeping the core values, integral to Cosmos together, such as decentralization and diversity. So I'm super excited about it. And if you want any feature on Cosmos on Akash, you can just come to a steering committee and make a proposal, and sorry, to a user group and make a proposal, and whatever decision is made on the proposal is going to be public, and it's going to be a public discourse. So I'm super excited about it.
So I kind of want to stick on this subject for a minute, and the way you're kind of describing the new Akash model has a lot of DAO feelings in there. Now, were there discussions around like turning Akash into a proper DAO? Was there what are some of the things you guys are thinking about? And this can really be a question for both of you guys, like general thoughts around the DAO model. Does it make sense? Do you feel like the tools are ready to kind of professionally run organizations as a DAO? Yeah, why don't I open that question up for both of you guys?
I'll have, I'll have my answers, but I'll have David share his thoughts on what he thinks about DAOs.
Yeah, go ahead, Greg, please.
Well, so for us, I don't want to. I'm not a big fan of labeling things. I feel like when you label things, biases automatically take precedence, right? So when someone says a DAO, there's a lot of negative connotation when that comes to a DAO, and there are assumptions and there are biases that I have to fight against, right? So is Akash a DAO? I don't want to say that because there are just properties that people assume a DAO should have, and I don't think Akash has it. Is there an open organization? Is it transparent and traceable and auditable and all of that? Yeah, it has a lot of those opportunities. But I don't want to constrain myself or constrain the ecosystem by labeling something that has a negative connotation. Now, I'm not saying DAOs are bad. I think DAOs are not properly classified, right? So just similar to like decentralization, like when we talk about decentralization, everybody has their own opinions. But for me, I rather use specific properties like peer-to-peer nature of it, by like permissionless nature of it, and the non-custodial nature of it. All these different properties that describe quote unquote a decentralized system. I rather prefer like describing a system with those granular properties instead of a broad categorization. That's why I don't like the term DAO as a best way to describe what we're doing with Akash, but rather an open organization.
Excellent. And yeah, and David, kind of same kind of question over to you. Just general thought. We were just talking about the kind of the new Akash framework and kind of how people can contribute. Wanted to get your general thoughts on DAOs, and then maybe you can kind of turn that into a question on Babylon and how folks can contribute to Babylon.
Yeah, frankly, we are kind of in the early stage of our project, so a lot of the development right now is in the core team. So we're just focusing on building the testnet right now. And when we launch the testnet, we would like to open source our code. And at that point, we'd like to involve more of the community in contributing towards Babylon. So Babylon is, a security layer. So it's really important that we have many people sort of working on it, trying to attack it, and figuring out potential limitations. So I think having the community is very important. In terms of the organizational structure of that, honestly, we have not thought enough about that to sort of discuss it here.
Yeah, so I like with exactly right. So when we say DAOs, people assume like, oh, everything has to be XYZ, everything has to be public. Like sometimes, like in Akash, we also have a group that deals with security incidents, and that's not very open, right? It can't be open because it's just not possible. There are sensitive issues like people like behaving irrationally, and how do you deal with that? There are a lot of like functions of an organization that just can't have the transparency one would demand, right? So like my problem with DAOs is like just lack of sort of like uh frameworks or maturity to address some of the sensitive issues. Like, well, in case of Babylon, I mean, it's a fully secure. It's a security as a service, so you can't really be as transparent during the process, which can be transparent after the process, right? Like, so that's one of my sort of like contingents. Sorry, my issues with like labeling something as a DAO. That makes sense.
Yep. Absolutely. And we're kind of on the collaboration side of things. So I wanted to mention for folks listening, if you guys do have questions for Greg or David, feel free to make a speaker request and I will get you in on the conversation. I have a couple more questions before we can really open it up to the audience. But for anyone listening, feel free to make a speaker request and I'll get you in on the conversation. I want to talk about collaboration. Could you guys talk maybe a little bit about some potential collaboration metrics between Akash and Babylon? I mean, security on the Cosmos is awesome, and I'm a big proponent, I think, as anyone listening in would be of that. So I would love to hear a little bit about how you guys have maybe thought about some different collaboration vectors between Akash and Babylon. Maybe we'll kick it over to David first.
Yeah, maybe first I'll explain a little bit about sort of where we are in terms of the collaboration. So,
sure.
So right now Babylon is building a testnet, and on this testnet, we are aiming to integrate with 5 to 10 chains in the phase 1 of our integration. So we divide the integration into multiple phases, and in the phase 1, the integration is basically through an IBC connection with the counterparty chain, and between Babylon and the counterparty chain, an IBC connection. Through the IBC connection, we are able to obtain information about the headers of the counterparty chain, in this case Akash, and because through IBC, these headers are essentially timestamped onto the ledger of Babylon, And through this timestamp and combined with the timestamp that Babylon gets onto Bitcoin, we can now provide an oracle. So at this point, we have an oracle that gives a Bitcoin timestamp to every single block of the Akash testnet. So that's where we are in terms of the integration. So we've already accomplished that about a few weeks ago. And so phase 2 and 3 is now working out sort of, okay, now that you have a primitive, which is like an oracle, provide you with this Bitcoin timestamp. How can we use it in the Akash network? And that requires a further discussion onto use cases. For example, the fast unbonding could be one example, but we can be creative and think of other examples that are perhaps more specific to what Akash needs. So I think that's sort of where we are. Greg, you probably have more thoughts, please.
Yeah, I share the thing. So right now, like if you look at Akash token, Akash security model, right? Akash is secured by a proof of stake consensus. That's essentially comes down to the token and how the token holders sway their votes. Each token has one vote, right? Um, and our security budget, in the sense how much we pay as a chain, is fairly high because it comes from inflationary tokens to pay for the security budget, right? Um, and so the price performance, I feel, is very low. We pay higher price for lower security, but if I can optimize the security budget to have much better price performance by borrowing Bitcoin security, I think will be a lot better and a lot more secure chain, right? So I see a future where we can, borrow Bitcoin security and pay relatively less than what we're paying right now. So it's advantageous for Akash and Akash community in general, right? So I'm a hyper bullish on like being able to borrow security and also do it in a way that is significantly lower risk than completely changing your model. That means we can start off by partially borrowing security, and then as we get more comfortable and as the chain evolves, we can increase how much of security we can borrow, and we can also optimize ideally in hopefully real time in terms of how much we're paying, right? So you could say that, hey, some of the security comes in proof of stake and is is paid by these tokens, and X amount of cost. Some of that comes from Babylon. This is a cost, right? And so the token holders themselves can, have a say as to what security or where to, how much to pay for what kind of security. So I think we're going to like that's going to be a new model, and it's super exciting, right? And it makes Bitcoin much stronger. It makes Akash much stronger as a result of this corporation.
Yeah, so Greg, I think this is a really, really good point because I think at the end of the day, the security and the tokenomics have to be integrated. So I think working out sort of modification of the tokenomics that accommodate or that incorporates the Bitcoin security into the security model, I think is really a very exciting thing that we should definitely collaborate deeply on.
Cool. So I have one final
Right.
question before we can open it up to the audience here. And we discussed a bunch of stuff today, so thank you guys both for answering questions. We talked about DAOs, securing the Cosmos, the Justice Department announcement, which really doesn't seem to be all that lackluster. But yeah, I wanted to ask kind of what the future looks like for both Akash and for Babylon. What does the next 6 months look like for, pull out your crystal balls and look into them and, ask the crystal ball, what does the next 6 months look like for both Akash and for Babylon? Maybe starting with David.
Yeah, for Babylon, as I mentioned, we are shooting towards launching our testnet, public testnet, in the beginning of February, so in a few weeks from now. And we are shooting for having 5 to 10 chains integrated on that testnet, Cosmos chains, including Akash and other chains like Osmosis and Juno and Secret. So that's the first goal. And then in this testnet, as we build out our testnet, we are hoping to engage deeper with all our partners to develop interesting use cases on Babylon, and so that's sort of our main task in the 6 months, is to figure out new and interesting use cases beyond the unbonding use case, which is one thing we are pretty concretely working on, but other use cases such as, how to integrate it with the tokenomics in terms of improving the price of security. That's what Greg was mentioning. So these are the discussions and the work we want with our partners who already obtained a Bitcoin timestamp. And the question is, what's the best effective way of using that timestamp in maintaining the security of the chain? So that's our main task at hand, 6 months. And hopefully by then, we'll be working towards the test at the mainnet, which is probably launched near the end, later part of the year.
That's super exciting, and I think we want to start experimenting with Babylon as the testnet comes, and now we can actually do that in a fully open setting, so which is awesome, right? So we have these public groups that can start incorporating. Doesn't have to be a core overclock Clouds member. It could be people that are part of our shared community, right? So and as we're sort of going into GPUs in the next 6 months for Akash, I think it'll be amazing, and how we can further actually maybe even provide security to Bitcoin using some of these high-end chips we'll be tapping into. So I think it's going to be a very interesting mutual sort of collaboration between Babylon and Akash for the next 6 months.
Excellent. So I wanted to open it up for audience questions at this time. Maybe give it a 15 to 30 seconds here to see if anyone listening in. I see some familiar faces. Thank you, Punzi, for joining. I see Del Rey. Thank you guys for joining. I see Huey on here, ZJ. I see some familiar faces. So wanted to see if you guys had any questions about Babylon, about Akash, or about the collaboration between the two projects. Feel free to make a speaker request, and I will get you in on the conversation. And as a quick update, I've been watching the Justice Department briefing, and I haven't seen anything that has really knocked my socks off. So I think it's business as usual at crypto.
It's called Bizzalto. Bizzalo, sorry, Bizzalo.
Bizzalo. Yeah, I'm gonna look into these guys. I've never even heard of them, so I'm not too concerned right now. All right, so looks like we've answered everyone's questions. Looks like it was a bit of a smaller turnout today. I think everyone was had their eyes glued on the Justice Department, so it sucked all of the air out of the room. But now they're going to be very jealous. But luckily, this has been a recorded session, so for folks listening in, we'll be sharing this on YouTube at some point here in the future. But I want to see if there's any final thoughts for you, Greg, or you, David. Anything else you wanted to cover? Maybe you could talk about how people could get a hold of you if they have more questions about Akash or about Babylon.
Yeah, so please follow us on Babylon_chain on Twitter, and you can also join our Discord channel, Babylon Chain. You can find us there, and in the next few weeks, we'll probably be announcing more partnerships with other projects, and probably have more Twitter spaces to discuss the use cases, etc. And Greg, I'm really looking forward to this more in-depth discussion on this tokenomics, on how we could use Bitcoin security to reduce the price of security. That's
I know,
really
just
exciting.
think of that. I think that'd be really good to do some analysis, for across all chains, right? Like if you like bigger chains in terms of securing the actual money, like Osmosis, right? You can actually make a case in there. Look, first of all, your cost of securing is X, and also cost of compromise is Y too, right? So it's I think it's going to be super exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that's the really beauty of Cosmos, is because there are, it's so decentralized, so many chains, one can do a lot of experiments, and this is a kind of a pretty basic sort of fundamental issue associated with proof of stake in some sense, right? So Cosmos is one of the the earliest ecosystem, right? The earliest proof of stake ecosystem, I think, or near the earliest. And so I think that is a perfect place to do these investigation.
Totally. Awesome.
Cool. Well, thank you both for being on this today. Thank you all for joining. Follow both Babylon and Akash on Twitter. And yeah, stay tuned for some more Twitter spaces from the Akash Network in the future. Thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you in the metaverse.